This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, and welcome to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, certified dream life coach, Debbie Spector-Weissman. This is a place where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. The sad fact is that all of us have suffered from trauma at one point in our lives. It may have been a sudden event, an accident, or an illness that turned our lives upside down, if only for a little while. More likely than not, though, it was a hurt to our mental state, either outright abuse or insults or negative words that we took to heart, and which caused these feelings to fester into limiting beliefs about ourselves. To this day, these types of traumas may be keeping us from living our dream lives. An even sadder truth is that we may be affected by these internal blocks without realizing it while we go about our daily routines. What may seep into our consciousness, however, is a vague feeling of loss or incompleteness that we just can't quite put our fingers on. So if you found yourself overcome at times with sadness, anxiety, or a low-level stress that just never seems to go away, there is a way out of it. We're going to talk about how to do this with my guest, Soul Empowerment Coach Birgitta Visser. Birgitta overcame her own set of traumas and is committed to showing others how to take back their power. Birgitta also holds workshops and is the author of the book, Becoming Authentically. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Birgitta.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure to do so. It's such an important topic that we're going to be talking about because, Birgitta, so many people seem to be suffering these days. Depression is on the rise. Suicides are a big concern. And so many people just feel that sense of disconnect. Is this just a sign of our times, or in the age of social media, or are we just more aware of individual traumas?
I love that question. I love that you asked that question. I don't ever get asked that. And it is very, very important. You know, we live in very transformational times. The tides are shifting. People have become more aware. People have been awakening. And I mean, I think we live in beautiful times, but because people have been so accustomed to living a certain way, remaining stuck in their conditioning, it's hard for them to embrace that change. But when we look back, I mean, not just now, I mean, even previous years, I mean, suicide was on the rise, depression was already on the rise. And it's all because, let's face it, Debbie, our soul was not designed to live this way. What do? We get up in the morning, we go to work, we're stuck in a system. You can call it the matrix, I call it a societal paradigm. It's all the same thing. We're stuck in a system and we've got to work to live. But is that actually why we're here?
It's a very important question. And I'd also like to add on top of that, the whole age of technology.
Yes.
Because, I'm old enough, sad to say, I was around before computers,
Me too.
before smartphones. I remember when my daughter was in her early teens, we got her a pager because that was the great thing. That's how we can keep connected through a pager. So, but all these leaps in technology, it has to have a shift on our brain and our consciousness in a way that just adds to that disconnection.
Absolutely. Back in the 80s, because I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and people spoke to one another. They connected from the heart space. When you wanted to talk to somebody, you'd call them up via the landline, or you'd knock on the door, you'd drop by. These days, everything is done through technology, social media. And it's been designed that way. So do we really communicate from the heart? No, because we very much disconnected. When people ask me, for instance, and I'm sure it's the same with you and many listeners, they will go, "How are you?" But it's just a phrase. Does it really mean anything these days? No, Not really. Not like back in the 1970s or 80s or even prior to that time when I wasn't even born. But it's that disconnect that we have. And I say that is done by design because we're so dumbed down. When you hop on the train or the bus or anywhere in public places, you sit in a restaurant, what do people do? They're on their phones. What if you were to take that away from them? If you were to take away all the technology, what would happen to them? They're so addicted. It's become so normal. They don't know any different. And that is that shift away from actually delving into who we really are. And then people ask, well, why do we suffer so much? Why is there so much dis-ease? I never call it disease. It's a dis-ease within ourselves because we don't feel peachy in our own skin. And that is often due to a lack of love, self-love. People always say, yeah, but it's selfish to love yourself. No, actually, it's not. It's very important to have that relationship with yourself. And people don't have that anymore. Honestly, it's like, in a way, the world's falling apart. And yet, right now, everything has to be broken down brick by brick in order to rebuild it, as you may say, the new golden age.
It is, and it's sort of irony that people think, oh, I've got this phone, I'm connected to the world, I can get in touch with anybody and do anything and get anything. But really, there's this loneliness that's come over them because they don't have that heart connection with other people.
That is correct. And mind you, Debbie, I'll be very honest, I have the same. It's not like when I was living in different places in the world, back in even the 1990s, when life was very different. You'd meet up. Now everything is done via text. And let me say something. Even when it's texting, emailing, social media, when everything is typed out, things can be miscommunicated or misunderstood. That is often the case.
Oh, very, very much so. I mean, when text became the thing to do, emojis had to get there because the feeling was not in the words. And even emojis you could misread. And it just makes that disconnection even worse because you're not having that talk and that back and forth and that real heart-to-heart communication that you're talking about. And talking about what you touched on briefly, the idea of self-love. Yeah, you're right. People say, oh, love is loving myself. Oh, that sounds selfish. It's not. Can you expand more on the difference between selfishness and selflessness?
Yes. Funny. I touch on that in my book quite a bit. But yeah, selfishness is when we have the ego involved. Many people live very much from the ego. We live in a very competitive world, very comparable, I call that. Everyone compares themselves to one another, and that's not important. Honestly, what is important is how you feel about yourself and that you appreciate yourself and that you love yourself. And loving yourself is selfless, as I said, because you have to have a relationship, a loving relationship with yourself first and foremost. If you want to make the world a better place, you have to start with yourself. It doesn't come from without. Everything comes from within. And that is because we are energy, Debbie. And when people say, well, what do you mean we're energy? Well, in very layman terms, when you hop into the shower and it steams up and you wave your hand through the steam, that, as I say, is energy moving. We are all energy. And thus we create everything that's basically what we think we create and thus manifest in the outer world. But when the ego is involved and we don't heal and we continuously hold our soul hostage whilst our soul is going, excuse me, please, I want to be in the driver's seat. And the ego is like, will you just shut up already? And all the while, the mind's being fed and fed and fed. And the ego is just, sitting there really bullish in the driver's seat. And But that's why we're here. We're honestly, Debbie, we're here to return to a love for ourselves. Because if we love ourselves, if we come from a place of love, that fear just dissipates, all the negative dissipates, and we learn to love ourselves, accept ourselves, but we also learn to love others and accept them the way that they are.
Right.
And that's so important.
I don't believe that you can love unconditionally unless you love yourself.
Yes, yes. And for that, we need to heal our traumas. And that's one of the things that people do these days because things are shifting. And it's like, no, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to whack them all, all these emotions back into place. And what happens? Eventually, you become like a bunny boiler and everything just, it erupts because it's got to come out somewhere. And that's why when something pops to the surface, because we're all beautiful reflections of one another, we're all teachers of one another. Well, when we see it from that perspective, okay, well, what are you trying to teach me? Why am I triggered? How can I heal? What do I need to do? That's what you analyze it, you evaluate that.
Yes. And you actually overcame your own set of traumas
Yes.
so much. When was it when you realized that there was a way to get out of this misery that you had created?
Sometimes for me, it was one step forward and two steps back. I had to go through a lot of trauma, and even in my childhood, because I was abused in my childhood as well. And I did starve myself in my teens and very much into my early 40s, to be honest, and not anymore. But I think I had a turning point in 2009. That was a first turning point. That doesn't mean that prior to that, I didn't have healing done. I did through NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, but that didn't work for me. So I always say this to people: what works for some may not necessarily work for others, but you have to do whatever agrees with your spirit. But for me, 2009, that was a turning point because I hit the bottom of that rock and I really had to climb up because my ex was a crack addict at the time and I didn't know that. And I must say he's doing very well for himself now. He's turned his life around many years later, but he landed in bed with the Crips in Holland. And I had my life threatened, and my mom got me out of Holland. He was held for ransom by the Crips because he owed them money. And I helped the police and I saved his life, and he was deported back to the US. Yes. And, yeah.
This is just so hard to cope with.
It was difficult. And mind you, when my stepdad passed away in 2000s, I had my stint with drugs for several months. It was more recreational, but one night I took too many E's and I suffered from blackouts, and I could have killed myself at that time. But you live and learn. I always say there's no right or wrong in how you decide to experience life. But for me, I tried to. My mom got me out of Holland in the space of several days, and I tried to take my own life just downing a whole box of ibuprofens. And that, of course, all I had was a really good night's sleep for like 12 hours and woke up without a headache. But I decided, I can't go on like this. And my mom just said to me, "Why don't you go see a counselor?" I did, Debbie. And it's hit or miss. I'm not saying that all counselors are bad. There are good ones out there. But this one was terrible. She just said to me after I told her my story, "Oh, Birgitta, you're going to be fine. You're strong enough." And I just sat there, okay. And I left. And I thought, I want to get better. I cannot go on like this. So I looked up I looked for a Reiki practitioner and I found one. So I ended up going the holistic route. And I studied Reiki as well. But that was, as I always say, it was my saving grace. And I think sometimes we have to go through very traumatic experiences and understand that there are opportunities for you to heal and just peel back the onion layer bit by bit. And the only way you're going to get back to a more authentic version of yourself is when you take the route to heal.
Absolutely. That is such powerful advice you just said. And I talk about it too, and I talk about dreams and nightmares and how nightmares are so awful, but they're really the basis for healing. Because when you do understand what the nightmare is telling you, that's your opportunity for growth, just like what you're saying. We are going to talk more about healing with Birgitta Visser, and we'll be right back. Are you a woman over 50 feeling lost and disconnected? Have your dreams been shattered by self-doubt and insecurity? We understand. Our new guide, Morning Confidence Boosters, is designed to help you finally break free from the chains of doubt and insecurity that have been weighing you down. It's a 5-step plan that will empower you to tap into your inner strength and courage, allowing you to take control of your life and start living with purpose and passion. Rekindle that lost spark of confidence and start moving toward your goals with newfound enthusiasm. Invest in yourself. Take the first step toward true confidence today with Morning Confidence Boosters. Click on the link in the show notes for more.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about the path to healing with Birgitta Visser. Well, Birgitta, you call yourself a soul empowerment coach now. So what exactly does that mean?
Soul Empowerment Coach is all about, it's exactly what it says. It's returning from that state of disempowerment, because we often give our power away to people. And that's why we huff and puff and we moan. Why does this person do this? Why do they do that? And it's really taking back control, taking back your power, and realigning your soul within the grid of yourself so that you feel comfortable within your own skin rather than feeling at a dis-ease within yourself. And again, that's where the healing comes in.
Well, often though, when we're trying to get our power back and let go of behaviors that don't serve ourselves anymore, we're so deeply programmed. We talked about that earlier, how that programming is just there within us. How do we break that cycle and re-empower ourselves and get our power back?
I think the most important thing is that we take accountability for our lives, regardless of what has happened to us, even though it was not by a fault or through a fault of our own. You have to learn to forgive. If you really want to move forward in life and to progress, then you have to alchemize your experiences. It's very, very important. And we can, and you're right, many people are very deeply programmed. And it's like, yeah, but I can't. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's a choice. At the end of the day, Debbie, it is a choice. Do you want to heal? Do you want to improve your life, or would you like to remain where you're at and, stay in that victimhood?
I'm so glad that you talked about forgiveness, because I think it's such a powerful thing, and people don't realize it because they may be so caught up in anger against somebody or anger against themselves that they said, oh, it's not going to do any good to do that. But talk about how to forgive. How can you actually authentically forgive?
Oh, it took me many years. But now, honestly, now for me, it's very easy because I've come to that place. I come from a place of love. But for me, being abused in my childhood, even being assaulted in the modeling industry, being treated like a doormat by many, many people, even in relationships. But I took that accountability, and through healing myself, and by going to various healers, it's almost like I stripped back the layers of that conditioning. And once you take that responsibility and you look at life from a different perspective, it's like you shift your mindset. There is this saying in quantum mechanics, change your thinking, change your life. That's a very simple motto, but it's all about shifting that consciousness or shifting your mindset. And that it's not easy, but you have to start somewhere. And that's the thing that I say to people. It doesn't matter what road you choose, but please take accountability and do something to change your life. For me, what worked for me as well, I mean, I love to meditate. Meditation is, I stopped for a little while and now I've started again. And I wake up with so much more clarity. I do my meditation in the morning, 20 minutes and 20 minutes at night. It gets me back to that, I call it 0 point, Zen point. It just recenters me. And that's just important.
It is so important. And like you said, there are many different ways we could do it. And if meditation doesn't work for you, there's something else that might work. Maybe Reiki would work, or maybe dream work would work.
Yes.
It's what works for every individual. But I want to get back to what we were talking about briefly before, which was the whole idea of self-love. Because it's not, to me, I don't believe it's not as simple as just saying, okay, today I'm going to love myself.
Oh, no.
What advice do you have for people who want to reclaim their love?
I'm going to say something. Dad used to give me an exercise, and we were kids. And he'd say, stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself. And I was like, what? Because that's the hardest thing to do. It really is. And especially for men, for many, many years, I hated myself. But I'm okay with me now. I'm okay. It's not like I say it in the mirror every single day, but I accept myself as I am now. And that's very, very difficult for people. And how do you get there? It's by changing little things, doing things for you. If you're not happy within yourself, ask yourself why that is. Very, very important, because many people are not in agreement with their lives. They're not happy within their lives. But do they ask the question, why am I not happy? No, because many people just keep going. And as I always say, if you cannot love yourself, how can you ever heal yourself? And if you will not heal yourself, how in heaven's name can you ever love yourself? It's got to start with you, just making little changes for you and making the time for yourself.
And that is so important because, again, that gets into the question of time, because people always say, oh, I don't have time. But when you think about what you do with your time, then you do realize that you do have time. And a couple of years ago, I wrote a book about this called 101 Dream Dates. And the whole concept is that you spend, it could be as little as 10 minutes a day, or it could be the entire day, depending on what it is, doing something for yourself, by yourself, that is something you don't normally do. And so I have 101 suggestions on things you could do to do this. But by doing this and making it a practice, you begin to love yourself, because you're spending that time with yourself that you would never think that you did, because you think, I don't have time to do this. But you spend that time, you realize, hey, I'm not such a bad person. And, I'm kind of fun, and I'm creative, and I can do all sorts of fun things. And you build on that, and that's one way you get that self-love. And then you are free to go about loving everybody else. And
make a bucket list. I did that. Yes. I made a bucket list too, because I'm an idiot like that. I love to challenge myself because I have a fear of heights. And so what did I do? I went skydiving. I jumped out of a plane. I did that. And I was glad when my feet touched the ground again, but I did it. And I did many other things. And the one other thing I did, when my stepdad passed away in 2000, I promised him that I would run for charity because he passed away from cancer. And I never did for 16 years. That I kept running in my head. And eventually I thought, no, when I was going through such incredible growth and healing, because I in Florida, I walked through the Akashic records. So that was Akashic healing, and it was very, very powerful for me. And so I decided, no, I'm going to do stuff for me. And I started to run, and I ran many 5Ks and sometimes 10Ks, because I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it.
And you did it.
Yes, but I will say one thing. What many people will do is yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And what happens? They're on their phone and they're on their computers. And then it's like, it's procrastination. It's like switch off completely and go and do something for yourself, even if it's reading a book or something that you've been wanting to do for a long time, and just take an hour for yourself.
Absolutely. I want to switch gears for a little bit and talk about that you act as a channel for wisdom from the ancient healers. When did you realize that you were able to do this, and how do you access it?
So this was back, I've always, even since when I was a kid, I saw one of my guides and she was a teacher, and I was stuck on this very silver cord. I remember that. I was about 5 years old, but I've had many things in between. But when it comes to channeling, that came to me in 2016. And my then mentor, Alania Starhawk, who does the Akashic Records healing in Florida, she had a workshop, how to become a divine channel. And I thought, oh, yeah, let's go. And it was a big group. And I was sitting by myself in a corner. That's just the way that I am. And she did a meditation with light language, because she also speaks light language. And she had the singing bowls. And she counted to 3. Boom, I was gone. Heaven knows where I went. And then a half an hour later, she counted back from 3, 2, 1, and boom, I was back in the room. And everyone had seen the many masters, the archangels, their guides, colors, got messages. Well, what did I get? Diddly squat, nothing, nada. And I was really upset. I was just sitting there wiping the tears away with the sleeve of my vest. And she gave an exercise. And that's how she started to channel. And it's really easy. You just sit down with a notepad and a pen, and you say to spirit or your guides, the universe, you say, I'm ready to receive. That's what she did. And I went home. I ran out the workshop when it was done, hopped in my car, went home. And I did that exact same thing that night. And for me, that's how it started to flow. I think I was a little bit exasperated. I didn't even think. My mind was just woof. So it just flowed. And then I looked back and I was like, oh my gosh, this is old English. This is pretty cool. And so I continued doing that every single day, because it's like riding a bicycle or going to the gym. You have to do it regularly so that you become a pro at it. And then I started to use my oracle cards to see who I would get. And I would just sit there with the card and ask them, whether it was an archangel, ascended master, you name it, if they had a message to convey and if they could tell me something about themselves. And that's how I did it. Well, and it works, really works.
Yes, that is amazing. Oh, Birgitta, the time has flown. So my final question to you is, how can people find out more about you and your work?
They can find me on my website, powersoulhealing.com, on Facebook and Instagram under Universal Light Warriors, and on my YouTube channel, Power Soul Healing.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Birgitta, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Debbie.
We've been speaking about overcoming trauma with Birgitta Visser. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio.